next morning, we set off at first light and steamed the final couple of miles to the coast. So just a couple of 100 meters down there is the Bay of Bengal. And this bit of land seems to be where the tidal waves of the cyclone hit first and most severely. We have a 2-hour walk along a desolate beach to reach the deliberately remote destination I chose. I decide to explore away from our group, and before long, find shocking reminders of what happened a month ago. I count 15 bodies in total. And this is the kind of thing we've been seeing along this beach all morning, and I think people just want to find someone to blame for something like that, and I'm not sure there is. It's just terribly, terribly sad. It doesn't really bear thinking about it. Okay. Most of the bodies seem to have been dealt with here, but even these few unburied ones must be psychologically harmful for those nearby. Struggling across the last obstacles before the village of Aung Lang, I have a rising sense of foreboding. I want to make sure I talk to the villagers themselves this time, but what state of mind can the survivors possibly be in? Yeah.
It's a monastery.
That was the monastery?
Yeah.
We're told that 580 people lived here before Cyclone Nargis. Many took refuge in this monastery, which collapsed in the height of the storm. 410 people died. And is this must be one of the worst affected villages by Nargis anywhere in Irrawaddy, do you think?
Awaga, time and go. Awaga, time and go. Online.
These people were moved to government camps soon after the cyclone, and, incredibly, have returned with a few basic supplies in the last few days. They say they've come home in order to plant their crops. What is their biggest problem? Health? Food? Water? Or shelter?
They want all.
As in Pinsalu, I'm told the cyclone killed more women and children than men. I want to ask the surviving few about their needs as well. Are any of you unwell? Do you feel poorly?
Happy.
I wasn't expecting such smiles. These children are just happy to be back home. You like your native village more than the other village?
The other village.
Can I ask what you did in the cyclone in Nargis?
Huh?
What does she say she thinks, or any of the children, what did they think was happening? On the walk back to the boat, I'm pointed to a life-saving refuge. So this is the tree that the little girl climbed up in order to hide from the rising water. Those kids were just amazing, weren't they? I can't imagine what I would be like, age 8, dealing with both my parents being dead, both my friends being dead, and this trip has provided me with a snapshot of just one small part of the Delta. But in suddenly being given such free access, I think I've gained a more nuanced understanding of what's been going on in the weeks following Cyclone Nargis. I think it surprises me in a way that the government has done anything at all. That all the villagers agreed within a day of the cyclone, they were getting assistance, they were being picked up in boats, camps were set up and food was being distributed. That the government has done anything has left me feeling quite positive. But the truth is, it is actually a month later. Not a single house in the worst affected villages has been rebuilt. They get filtered water in bottles, but their water supply isn't secure, their paddy fields haven't been drained. So I have to temper my positive feelings. If the international community had been allowed in, given full access, I think it would be quite a different story in those severely affected villages now. The villages I visited have so far avoided epidemic disease or severe hunger. But the worst of the monsoon is still to come. A huge aid effort is now required both by the international community and the government of Burma in order to avert a second catastrophe.
And that story from the BBC's Newsnight programme. And I'm joined by a man playing a central role in the huge aid effort now underway. He's Andrew Kirkwood, and he's a director of the Save the Children organisation based in Rangoon. Andrew Kirkwood has flown from Burma to the Thai capital Bangkok to speak to us about the challenge of getting desperately needed aid to more than 2 million people. Andrew Kirkwood, thanks very much for speaking to us today. Can I just ask, by asking you, well, look, at least officially, 138,000 people dead or missing. That's about half the total death toll from the 2004 tsunami, yet you're only getting a fraction of the aid. Why?
Well, I think the media attention given to the disaster in Myanmar has been, not anywhere close to what it was in the tsunami, and I think that many more international tourists were affected in the tsunami. I think there's many things at play, and including the impression by many that assistance is not getting through, and I think that at the moment that's not the case at the moment.
Can you really blame people? I mean, there are fears internationally that if money or aid is donated, it will end up in the hands of the military junta.
Well, I mean, I can't blame people for fearing that. I think that many of us have been afraid that would happen, but frankly, that hasn't been the case. In terms of Save the Children's efforts, we currently have 400 people down in the Delta. Other agencies have, significant numbers of people as well. There is a huge effort going on at the moment to get life-saving assistance to people who need it.
Do you think the dire warnings initially of a post-cyclone massive death toll from disease, have they proved to be unfounded?
I think that our worst fears have certainly not been realized. I don't think that it was irresponsible of people to talk about the second wave of deaths, because we were fearful of people living in desperately crowded conditions in these temporary settlements and very unsanitary conditions. And under those conditions, it usually is only a matter of time till there's a big disease outbreak. But many of those camps have been closed now. People have gone back to their communities, many of them. And I think for that reason, partly, we have not seen the disease outbreak that we feared.
Give me a sense of the size of the reconstruction effort.
The study, or the assessment team that came back estimates that between 60 and 70% of people living in their villages have rebuilt some shelter with some plastic sheeting, bamboo. So, I mean, people are living in some form of shelter, but nothing like what they had before. When people had wood houses before, now they're in bamboo. The people are not in the kinds of situation that they were before the cyclone. Very few people have received enough assistance to get them through the next few months, let alone to rebuild their lives. So we're going to be working in the Delta for at least another 18 months to come. And I think people shouldn't underestimate the challenges that still lie ahead.
Not wishing in any way to play down your effort in the relief work, but how much of what we're seeing now is directly a result of the resilience of the Burmese people themselves, who get very little in the first place, and how much of it is a result of the government-led relief effort?
Well, okay, I mean, we're all very encouraged by how much people have gotten on and helped themselves. It's very hard to estimate what the government's relief efforts are at the moment, because they're not sharing that information. However, 50% of our people are buying their food on the market. So that's encouraging that people are able, some people, 50%, are able to buy food. Their markets are functioning. People have some resources that they're able to use. Obviously, as an international humanitarian organization, Save the Children is mostly concerned with those other 50% that are not able to do that and are relying on us to distribute food. We expect to have to distribute food to hundreds of thousands of people until about November of 2009, when the next paddy crop will be harvested.
But these were people used to getting actually very little in the first place, weren't they? When you compare the level of international aid received by ordinary Burmese, say, compared to Laos or Cambodia.
Absolutely. That's why I was saying, I mean, the humanitarian assistance to Myanmar is highly politicized, and because of that, Myanmar gets $2.50 per person per year in assistance, compared to $30 to $50 per year in Cambodia and Laos. Now, the good news is that I think that many international donors have depoliticized their assistance for the cyclone, and it's very important that that continues. There's going to be a huge amount of assistance required in the coming months and years, frankly, and it would be really tragic if the Burmese people were penalized because of a political situation over which they have very little control.
You're in quite a difficult position, aren't you? I mean, your life's work is to raise international awareness, draw attention to the problems inside Burma, the suffering of the people. Yet, if you go too far, if you're too critical, you risk being thrown out of the country. That's the dilemma of the aid worker, isn't it?
I think we can talk reasonably openly about some of the problems in the country. I think that the health care situation in the country is really poor. I think partly because the government spends far too little on health. They spend 60 cents per person per year on health care. At the same time, the international community, as I said, gives $2.50 per person per year for the country, and that has got to change too. And in both instances, the Burmese people suffer. But it's been, up to now, too many stories about what wasn't done and what hasn't been done to date, and not enough stories on what was done and what is being done.
Well, Andrew Kirkwood, we're out of time. We're going to have to leave it there, but thank you very much for taking time out of what is obviously a hectic schedule to fly to Bangkok to speak to us today.
You're most welcome.
And for tonight's postcard, we travel to the other side of the world, to a city that, like many of its well-dressed citizens, takes its appearance very seriously. When the sun sets, Paris glows